Hey everybody, welcome to another installment of CGMA's Interview with the Masters featuring Christian Bull. Christian, welcome. I will make you presenter now.
Thank you.
Yeah, good to have you.
Okay.
So Christian is actually one of our teachers at CGMA for the 3D Character Arts program. And Christian, can you tell everyone a little bit about what you're teaching with us at CGMA?
Well, I'm running the anatomy course, which is actually two courses because it's it's a lot of stuff to go over. It's currently 2 5-week courses, and yeah, we essentially go through studying the anatomy of the human figure, in terms of specifics, in terms of what the shapes of the bones are, what the shapes of the muscles are, but also in terms of the function of those bones and of those muscles. So that we can understand the figure when it's posed, and also we're looking at kind of the I guess the aesthetics of anatomy as well. So looking at it from a design side of things, and even though the course is all about human anatomy, we're just keeping an eye on the design side of things, and thinking how we can study anatomy from an artistic point of view rather than just a purely dry functional point of view, which is what you'd need to do if you were a doctor, for example.
Right.
So yeah, that's my role here. So I create the course content, and I'm also an instructor giving student feedback.
Very cool. That's awesome. We're very happy to have you, and can't wait to see some of your demo.
Yeah,
so I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
When you first started out, how did you get into anatomy? What inspired you to become an anatomy artist?
I'm not sure exactly what it was. By the way, I'll just start doing things just while I'm talking, so it's so it's not a blank screen, and then as I get to showing relevant images and stuff, I'll switch out to that. So yeah, I remember so I studied computer animation at university. I went to Bournemouth, and I knew I wanted to work in films at that time. So yeah, I was there, but I was doing, I didn't know. I thought I wanted to be a matte painter, and I thought I wanted to be a lighter. At one point, I thought I wanted to do like coding and R&D stuff, and so yeah, it wasn't until I guess yeah, but during that time, I was always sketching and playing around with stuff, and I think for my final project, I did this. I did a stripper peeling off her skin, right? That was my final animation, and so I guess that was kind of the jump point of it, because in all the prep for that, I ended up filling up however many sketchbooks of just anatomy studies. At that point, I was thinking, maybe character art's what I want to do, and that was also just when ZBrush was coming out and becoming a thing, and I realized then that actually, the software was so accessible and was going to get so accessible that actually all of the work was going to go towards guys who could sculpt. And I'd done my own, I kind of played with it and played with drawing and stuff, but it was, I think at that point when I went, no, I'm going, completely all out, and spending all of my time doing this, and creatures and characters are what I want to do. So so yeah, that was sort of the jumping off process, and and then after graduating, I did the standard junior. I was able to work to go straight into kind of Soho working, and that was I was working at Cinesight. That was kind of a really lucky break, but I was doing all the standard junior stuff. I was roto and match move and things, and I just was just itching to do characters, and I was impatient. So so at that point, I left, and I went to work for a smaller company up in Manchester, which is near where I grew up, and there I was doing a whole bunch of stuff, but a lot of it was character-based, characters for games or whatever, and but it still wasn't enough, and that's when I jumped off and went to Italy, and that's I went to the Florence Academy of Art and was studying sculpture and drawing there, and yeah, that was then really the and then anatomy was part of my studies there. That's part of everyone's studies there, and I'd already had a solid base because of I'd spent a year getting a stripper to peel off her skin, and it was just sort of working on that and working on that, and it sort of it sort of went from there. But I think it inevitably goes hand in hand with taking your character work seriously, for a certain
Mhm.
personality type, I guess. I do know some very, very good character artists who just don't have that strong anatomy base, but they just have a strong sense of design, um, and you know, and a strong eye, and that can compensate, you know, for a lot of like that can fill a lot of holes in your game as far as anatomy understanding goes. But
Oh yeah, for
yeah,
sure.
I guess that's a pretty rambling answer to your question, but there you go.
Oh no, it's
That's about it.
interesting. So where are you now?
Now I freelance. So yeah, for the last I left. So basically, you know, I you know, even though film was what I wanted to do, I left because I wanted to be doing creature work, and I wasn't. I was. I guess I was too impatient, you know, and I just wanted to be doing that whenever I could. So that's, you know, that's when I went to Manchester to work there. And then when I went to Italy, I carried on freelancing, and just kept doing that until I was at a standard where I thought I could get into film as a, you know, as a kind of senior level character artist, and that's when I went back into Soho and went to Double Negative just as John Carter was kicking off, and then I was there for 3 and a bit years or whatever, and then, you know, through one reason or another, which maybe we'll come to, maybe we won't, you know, I decided that actually what suited me best was just to go freelance, and for the last for the last 2 and a bit years. I don't know. It's time's going fast, but for a while now,
Yeah.
I've just been freelance, and you know, so I nip into um, doing bits. You know, I've been into Cinesite a few times to help them with their with either finishing a show. I helped them just finish on Hercules, and I helped them with their pictures for Guardians of the Galaxy sculpting group for that,
Oh, that's awesome.
and Jupiter Ascending and stuff. So, you know, I kind of, you know, because also, you know, a lot of my friends are there and stuff, and I miss that side of things. So yeah, I sort of jump around and do various bits of stuff. You know, so, sometimes on set stuff, and I did a bit of CG supervision on Call of Duty trailer recently. So
Oh,
bits and bobs,
awesome.
but
The
yeah,
new Call of
largely
Duty
just from work.
or
Oh, you know
the
what?
newest?
I don't know when this thing's out. It's the trailer was like a 1 minute thing, and I don't know, you know, I don't know when it comes out, and I don't know how much I can say about it. It was a whole bunch of zombie things. I don't know if that's you know, I know nothing about Call of Duty. I just, but yeah, it was Call of Duty with zombies, and it was just it's like a 1.5 minute long animatic, um, and yeah, you know, that was a lot of fun, you know, because that was, you know, obviously I did some modeling and some concept stuff on that, but it was generally just supervising the process. You know, it was a team of like 15, 16 guys, something like that.
Cool. That's awesome. Do you think you can show us some of your work from some production stuff you worked on?
Yeah, sure. Well, I mean, the thing is that I never really get around to putting a reel together. So let's see. I've got a bunch of windows open here, and let's. I had like a temp reel for. Oh, it's on a window here. Okay. Um, so yeah, I had a couple of companies asking me for reels and stuff after John Carter, which I never did do a reel, but I put together this kind of temp reel to show some of the, this is right at the end of it, to show some of the work that I'd done on John Carter. That opening thing is a concept I did for Paradise Lost, a pitch.
Oh,
So this was,
awesome.
so on John Carter, I started as part of the Face team and did that for a year. And then after that, I was supervising the shot sculpt team where we just, can you see this, is this feedbacking, can you see this clearly enough if I'm
Yeah,
scrubbing through this?
I can see
Um,
the scrub.
so
That's
yeah,
cool.
essentially what we did was we just went through each shot and just, you know, so this is what the rig would give us, and we'd go through and just make this, you know, make this look good, essentially. And we just do that for every hero shot in the thing, and it was a real eye-opener for me to see, you know, the power of kind of art directing each shot, and the you know, the power of yeah, giving giving creative freedom to you know, to the artist, you know, both at the start in terms of the concept and the build, and then also at the end, because it's always struck me as kind of odd that, you know, we spend so much time on the getting the model right and everything, and then, you know, in the T-pose, and then everything else is dictated by the rig, which is often amazing, but you know, often here, for example, you know, this is the end result of the rig, and you know, the animators have broken it, and there's just a whole bunch of stuff that's happened to it, and it's just not suitable for you know, a film of that kind of budget. So but then we go in and this sculpt is that takes you like a day to get there. Whereas the R&D it would take a rig to be able to figure that out is huge. So it's just smart from a
Absolutely.
efficient from a budget point of view, and then also this way you can really art direct these shots. So if I scrub back to not this even this one, actually in this shot. So I didn't sculpt this one. This is one of the guys in my team who did it, Richard Durant.
Cool.
But in this shot, Tars is like much more muscular than he generally would be. And this was just kind of Richard always beefs everything up that he sculpts. But actually, for the purposes of this shot, where Tars is this super aggressive, like alpha male guy for this shot, it works. It's off model, but it tells the story of that shot. And similar thing with this shot here. Yeah, Tal, the character on the left, we beef it, and this was again actually Richard doing this. So, but he gets beefed up to twice as what he is normally, and it works for that shot because again he's the alpha male in this shot, so he's showing off and kind of puffing up his chest, and
Wow, that's really cool.
Yeah, so that was so that was a long time on that, and and then there'd be different stuff like this digi-double arm. We'd realised that the actual arm that we had in the plate wasn't working. Then suddenly you've got a day to sculpt, to sculpt an arm that has to get thrown into the shot, and
Oh, that's awesome.
So really short deadlines, but a lot of fun. And then and then this stuff was the facial team was supervised by Marcus Schmidt, and but it was generally for much part of the year really just the two of us doing all of the facial work. We had some really talented guys who would come on and off. We had Alex Huguet. I don't know if I pronounced his second name right. He's Meter Mesh Online. He's one of the original sort of ZBrush internet superstars. We had Marco De Luca, who's one of the most talented guys I've ever worked with. Yeah, so just a year of facial stuff and then a year of body stuff, and that was really and this was the first film that I was doing creature work for.
Oh wow!
So it was
that's awesome.
Yeah, so it was the film bombed, of course. Everyone knows that if they've heard about the film even, but was still one of the best shows I've ever worked on. So yeah, so this is that's just my real showing, and this is some clay work, and then yeah, I mean part of my journey was then becoming an anatomy teacher at Double Negative, running anatomy classes, and then also running sculpting classes there, which so these things are like 3-hour sculpts, or some of them were done over. This one's a 3-hour one. This one's a 6-hour one, I think. But we would just have a model up live, and we would be we'd be in a screening room. It's like a cinema, and we'd just be sat there sculpting from live models. Yeah, that was that was a lot of fun. I had it was a good few years on at DNEG.
Oh, that's fantastic.
So yeah, that's all of that stuff, and yeah, I don't know. I can go into showing some segueing from there, showing up some other stuff. But
oh yeah, that'd be awesome.
Do you have any more questions?
Yeah, I would love to see your other stuff.
Okay, so where do we head from here?
Oh, excuse me.
I mean, it's okay. So the process of so after John Carter, DNEG didn't really have any creature work, and I was there for a while, and I sort of did kind of just looked after the creature modeling pipeline stuff, right? So I was creating the generic man rig they'd use for all the the generic man model they'd use for all the digi-doubles and the female, and just coming up with do we go with pose-based deformation, do we go with muscle systems, and just playing with all of that. But then it started to become I did Superman. I was on Man of Steel. I did the digi-double body for Superman, and
oh nice.
Worked on, Marcus was on that again, Marcus Schmidt, and so we did the Superman face, and yeah, and then a couple of the other, what's her name, the Superman girl, whatever, I can't remember what she's called, digi-double body for her, and a bunch of stuff. So that was fun, but then it became Total Recall hard surface stuff, and then I found myself as a build supervisor on Captain Phillips, right, which was all boats, and at that point I was like, I fought so hard to get into doing creature stuff that I don't want to give that up, even if it's for supervising you know, really good films like that. It's actually creature work
Yeah.
that I want to do, and so, you know, that's when I left to freelance. And also I wanted to concept more, because what, you know, I'd been playing with some concept stuff there, and I'd done some stuff for Fincher was at one point going to do 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, and so, you know, did a bunch of deep sea stuff for that, and was like, you know what, I kind of like this, and I kind of, you know, would rather be getting the credit for doing the concepts than having another company getting the credit to do it. So, so, you know, then I left DNEG, and then at the same time there was a bunch of the really kind of old guard VFX guys, people who've been around Weta and ILM for 20 years or whatever, and they went to set up a company in Barcelona, a company called Minimo, that their idea was that they actually, rather than, because VFX is a very inefficient process, you know, character work can be very inefficient, so they were sort of like, what we'll do is we'll handle the full build, and we'll handle concept, build, asset, textures, all of that, and we'll hand that over to the big VFX studios to then animate. So, you know, so they were setting that up at the same time that I was leaving, and the first, it was kind of like a film that just landed at our door, which was a film that a really low budget British indie film called The Machine, and I'd done some work for free for these guys, just, you know, helping them out with doing some concept stuff for they were doing a promo to get the budget for the full film, and then they got the budget, and so then that was kind of the first thing that I did, and let's see. So I don't know how cleanly this is going to play through, but there's, you know, this was essentially a robot that, you know, I did the concept and the build for, but in this shot it gets filled up with like all this fluid gunk stuff or whatever. And, you know, the Minimo guys, they were amazing with fluids, so really this became a really efficient way of working, you know, and the challenge was sort of how good can we make this tiny budget look, you know, just doing everything, you know. So this is my, you know, sometimes you see the model in real life, sometimes it's kind of the machine glows underneath the actress. But yeah, the challenge that we set ourselves was, look, we've worked in VFX at this kind of, you know, the high-end Hollywood level. Can we just cut out all of the inefficiencies? And this is now going into Monsters, which I can't show that, so let me just backtrack a bit. Yeah, can we cut out all of these efficiencies and make it look kind of you know, make it look high-end sort of thing, and that was a lot of fun to do that, you know, and we, I think, you know, you can check out the film and see what you think, but, you know, I think we did make it look a lot more expensive than it actually was, and that then fed through into well, the next project after that was Monsters, which comes out. This I can show because it's the trailer on YouTube. This is the sequel to Gareth Edwards' Monsters, who then went on to direct Godzilla. So the sequel isn't being directed by him; it's being directed by a guy called Tom Green. And I know this streaming may not work well, so I'll pause it in places. But this was a strange thing, and just, yeah, just opportunities are strange things, I think, because this came about by you know, I box in my spare time to kind of keep myself sane from being sat at a computer for so long. I box and do MMA and things, and there was a guy on my boxing team who was an animator, and he'd never seen my work and I'd never seen his work, but one of his friends was a visual effects supervisor, and the guy said to him, look, do you know anyone who could create a film with monsters? And he said, well, I know a guy who sculpts and designs, so maybe he can. And so, you know, I then from that had a meeting with the director and the producers, and then again brought in Minimo, this team of really old school visual effects guys, and you know, we had this same challenge. We had this tiny budget film, and you know, had to, you know, just wanted to see what can we do with it, what, you know, how much how big can we make it look. And it started off, it was just going to be like one monster, and at the end we have like the final thing, we have about 5 different species of monsters in this thing, and so that was all, you know, so that was a fun thing for me. You know, it was concept, it was sculpting, it was doing the build, it was looking after the texture side of things.
That's a lot of work.
Yeah, it was a lot of work. But the nice thing was that you know, it's kind of, you know, part of the interesting, I guess, exercise of it for me was how many corners can we cut. So, you know, because typically you'll have the director and he talks to the visual effects supervisor, the visual effects supervisor talks to the modeling or the concept lead, and then you go down and you know, you end up having you know, however many voices in this process, and each time there's iterations and there's confusion and all of this. And so with this stuff, I would sit down with the director and literally just draw with him next to me and sign things off that way. So as soon as he was happy and I was happy, it was ready to go into production. So so for example, for this, if I pause in on this final shot, so this is like end of the film, huge massive monster comes out of the ground, but at this point we had no budget left, really, no time left to do it. So I think we had like a 5-day turnaround or something. So I just had a couple of intensive days, sat with the director, and just fleshing out, just doing loads of scribbles and then loads of quick sculpts and things, and just throwing stuff up there. And then as soon as he was happy, moving that into a build. And I did the texturing myself, but I knew that there'd be it would be a really fuzzy shot, so I knew that we wouldn't have to do a proper texture build, whereas you don't kind of get that level of control in a big visual effects studio, right? It just has to go through the standard pipeline. So it would probably go through a month-long concept, a month-long build, a month-long texturing, and then however much look dev on top, whereas we were able to go, well, all we've got is 5 days and however many few £1,000s to do it, so let's see what we can do. And so this creature has like these kind of big horns or whatever, that there's a baby creature that you don't see in this trailer, but he was a baby and he has these little horns. The idea is he's actually the same creature. Here he's grown massive, but when you see him, he's a proper Disney little baby. And so I just took his horns and scaled them up quite a lot and plugged them onto him because it was all about sort of time efficiency.
Yeah. Wow, you guys are pretty resourceful for doing this entire trailer in like 5 days or something.
No, it's just this final creature here.
Oh, the final creature.
So,
wow.
Yeah,
that's crazy,
I mean the full film. So it premiered at the British Film Festival a few weeks ago, and so it will be out end of next month. And we'll see how it plays through. But the whole thing for me was kind of, it was a year of my life still. But it was a year where I was dropping in and doing the stuff that I mentioned at Cinesite or wherever else. But
oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, so that was. So we'll see how that goes, but
yeah.
this,
best of luck.
like I say, this process really interests me because it's the same people doing the work that will be doing them at big studios. It's just cutting the corners and things. So from there I sort of started doing my own short film, and because here there's monsters, we can get away with a lot. So I said I've got a friend who's very good writer, both for novels and a script writer. So I said, look, can you write me a film with a little creature in that has no hair? Because I understand a lot of the creature pipeline, just hair I don't really know. And just give me a short 15-minute film, but I want to do something that hasn't really been done before. So monsters, we had such a tiny budget. Can we deliver a creature, a show full of creatures that interact? This one's fighting a dog. That do all of the stuff that we want creatures to do for a tiny budget, but we still get away with a lot because no one knows what an alien looks like. So I didn't want to go kind of photorealism. I'm not interested in that kind of hyperrealism thing, but I wanted something that has to emote and has to act. So yeah, I won't go into the specifics of that film, but I'll show you a couple of things that I'm because I can't show a lot of my personal professional work. So I'll show you some of this. So this is so here you have
okay,
this is the main character for it, and this is just I mean, this is still him at a concept stage. He's gone into the full build stage now and he's getting rigged, but these poses were just me playing around with stuff to get a feel for what the character is going to be like, I guess. But again, it's sort of like because I'm doing the concept and because I'm doing the build as well, and because I know I've done the Hollywood stuff enough that I know the corners that can be cut. The interesting process for me is like, can we do it? Can we do it? Can we get this guy to actually act? It's only a very short film, and he's not going to be on screen for that long, but still, it's a challenge. And I'm nowhere near through enough to know whether or not I'm going to do it. But I will. And yeah, so this is like an early rig stage. For the guy, and well, this is actually the first rig iteration, but just playing through the shapes, and and so these are all shapes that I've these little shapes that I've sculpted, because this is the nice thing, like it was sometimes tough, on John Carter spending a year just doing faces, 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 faces. But the nice thing is now is that I can do these shapes, really quite quickly, so you can get, and there's a lot of work that needs to be done here. Like I said, this is a first pass, but yeah, but at least I can do it a lot more quickly than it would. It would take a lot longer to get this through a Soho visual effects pipeline. I guess that's the thing, and it would cost a lot more. So, so this is the sort of the experimentation that I'm doing in in my own time. Yeah, and I think I mean there's another character for this film. I'll see if I can dig it up.
What's his name? He's so cute.
He's called Hans.
Hans, or Hans, okay.
Yeah, he's called Hans.
Oh, I get it.
H-A-N-S, but yeah,
okay.
clever, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, bear with me 1 second. Let's see if I can.
No problem.
Find. Oh well, so this is the basic concept sculpt that I did for the. So this has now gone into a full build and things, and changed a lot, but yeah, this is so basically Hans finds himself in a sort of cage fight or pit fight with this chicken creature. So yeah, that's I'm not going to go into the whole story of that. That's sort of an aside, but that's kind of in any time that I can get, that's what I'm looking at, and because the guy's doing the rigging for this, and everyone involved in it, my friends from people who work in film. So it's the same guys who would be working on the big budget Hollywood stuff. And I think visual effects itself is such a broken business model that something's going to change, and I'm really excited to see, like, what Gareth Edwards did with Monsters. He directed it, he wrote it, he produced it, and he did the visual effects himself, and that's, and he was very smart about it. You didn't see much of the monsters and things, but again, with Neil Blomkamp, who did District 9, he did the short film for that, and he was coming from an effects background, so he knew how to do all of that stuff, and then so when he did the feature film, he knew where to put the money, and made the film look like 3 times the cost it was. And I just think yeah, I think things will adapt in the visual effects world, and potentially it'll go to either cloud sourcing and work will be being done by guys around the world, or it'll be split into a whole bunch of smaller studios, or whatever it is. I think it's moving in that direction, and in either which way, that's I really enjoy being a part of that. I feel I kind of fit in there slightly more than I don't know. I just don't like being in an office, really. As much as I love the people and I love the work, it just the kind of freedom is something that I just am kind of sort of a real big fan of. I guess I don't know how to put it.
I see what you mean. I think a lot of artists feel that way too. When I was in the industry, I didn't enjoy sitting in an office all day, even though I love the people. It was just kind of confining, and it's hard to find inspiration sometimes when you're just stuck in a building all day in front of a computer.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, and there's of course there's 2 sides to that, because it's amazing to be surrounded by, like, the most talented guys that there are. That's and I think I think there's what you've got to be careful about, I think, and sometimes it can happen when you're kind of, if you spend a lot of time teaching yourself stuff, which is admirable, but sometimes I think you just have to keep an eye on your ego, I think, and being surrounded by guys who are just incredibly talented is always a good way to keep the ego in check, which is also an important thing for film, because it's a collaborative process, right? So it's of course, there's a large amount of film that's, a large amount of this sort of work, which is how good are you? How good is your sculpting? How good is your technical knowledge about, whatever it is, getting a creature into a pipeline, sorting out topology, stuff like that. But then it's also how well can you play with others, and that's sometimes overlooked, when people are asking, what important things are for getting into industry or whatever it is. well, you've got to work with the riggers, and you've got to work with the texture artists, and you've got to work with the animators, and the deadlines are going to be tight, and everyone's going to be grumpy, and everyone wants to go home and spend time with people they care about, and they can't because the deadlines are also crazy, and in all of that, can you still kind of keep a smile on your face and kind of just make yourself a nice person to be around? Can you still play nicely with others? And yeah, that's a really important part of being part of a visual effects artist or a games artist or whatever it is. We all work in these sometimes insanely sized teams, and yeah. So I don't know. I'm not going to start lecturing, but I just that's something that's I think often overlooked when people are asking, like, what does it take to be a visual effects artist or to be a character artist?
Yeah, I would imagine you'd have to be a very patient person for any of the roles inside of VFX. There's so much work that goes into the whole production, and just I think a lot of people
Yeah.
don't really get how much work artists are doing for certain things, and everyone's like, I want to be an artist. It's like, do you?
Yeah, yeah. And but there is a lesson there as well, in as much as like as great as the job can be, is to just kind of remind yourself it's a job.
Yes.
And that's not to lose track of that, I think, as well, because and this was something I really struggled with starting out, because when I was doing the character stuff for games, and some of the feedback that I was getting, I felt, and to be fair, still do feel, that it was poor feedback, and that what I was doing was better than what they were suggesting. But because I put so much work into it, it was really really heartbreaking to kind of go in and kind of do what I thought was making my work worse, and and that was because I was kind of treating it like I would be treating my own personal art project, and and if someone had come up to me and said, well, whatever that drawing or that sculpture you're doing, I want you to, make it much worse just because, and
Yeah.
and the lesson there was really like, well, look, it's a job, they're paying me to do it. I'm kind of lucky to get paid to do it, and so if that's what they want, that's what they'll get. And yeah, and I think that's a really important thing to come to terms with. It's not that you can't make yourself not care about your work anymore. You're
Yeah.
always going to be involved with it. You're always going to have some investment in it and care about it. But just bear in mind that it's a job, and it can get incredibly tedious, and it can get incredibly boring, and all jobs can, and so and as far as jobs go, if what you want to do is sculpt, or what you want to do is design, or whatever it is that you want to do, you find yourself doing it, and you find yourself you find people giving you money for it. Not only that, in terms of from like Soho visual effects, that kind of stuff, they pay you more than I would have ever thought of getting paid as when I chose to be an artist. So it's kind of crappy as it can get at times. It's it's still, you're still hard pushed to really complain about it. People
Right.
do, of
Yeah.
course, but
That's awesome. That's a good piece of advice, though. I think a common pitfall for artists is getting hung up on that fact, where it's like, what they think is good is actually not what the client wants, and then they become really
yeah,
defeated by that, and they just can't get over it, So
yeah,
that's actually a good thing to know going in, that what you're doing is not always going to be what the client wants you to do, and you'll have to listen and do what they want you to do, because they're paying you for
yeah,
it, even if it's bad, even
yeah,
if it's like, but yeah, I guess at the end of the day, if it's something that you really aren't proud of, in the end, you don't have to put your name on it, right? No. But
well, yeah, I
yeah.
mean, a lot of the time they don't even give you credit, so
Oh
so
no.
sometimes that decision's made for you. But yeah, you're never going to be able to sort of disconnect yourself from it entirely. But it's always going to be difficult if the client's being difficult, and
Yeah.
like I say, what job isn't? That's why you get paid for it.
That's very true. Do you find that as a freelancer, do you find that do you not get a lot of credit, like movie credit, or is that something where they still credit you for being a part of the team? Because
Yeah, you know, I didn't really notice it being that different. I mean, I didn't watch Hercules, and I didn't check to see if I have a credit on that. So I don't know as far as Hercules goes, but as far as Monsters goes, that was great, and you know, the machine as well, because there I'm, you know, because because by the end of it, you know, I'm friends with the director, so I sort of, you know, just ask and make sure. And you know, Monsters was the first film where I've, you know, where I get my, like at the end of the film I get just a screen to myself for a credit, you know, which I've never had before. So so from that point of view, I guess it's been better, you know. Yeah, in Soho Visual Effects, yeah, it's just a kind of gamble, you know. Like I wasn't expecting to get a credit on Captain Phillips, for example, because I left mid-show, and I got a good credit. From what I'm told, I got a text of someone saying that I had a good credit by myself. I haven't seen it, but then on Man of Steel, for example, I got nothing, and yeah, Total Recall, I got nothing. So it's, you know, it's really, I don't know, it's such a, such a gamble. You know, could be just the line producer at that company like you, or uh, you know, could be down to a whole bunch of things. But you know, I know what my name looks like already, so I'm not
right.
that fussed about the credits.
That's cool. Yeah, I was just kind of curious because I've had some friends of mine who do similar. They're like character artists like you, and they come in as a freelancer and do a bunch of work, and then at the end they don't get credit for it, and I'm like,
I
oh no.
Yeah, I think probably it's more likely that I wouldn't, you know, when I'm going into a bigger visual effects studio, and you know, probably just because the organization generally isn't, you know, super tight. So probably, you know, by the time that, you know, because I'll have probably left before the film gets properly wrapped, and probably by the time they get to that point, I expect they've forgotten I was ever involved, you know. So like I say, Hercules would be a good check to see if I did get a credit on that, and so I
Hmm.
can, so you know, I'll take a look and let you know. But yeah, like I say, it's you know, I think your first credit is quite an amazing thing, and like I say, on Monsters, it was nice to get, you know, the kind of above the line credit. But
Yeah.
outside of that, it's but you know, that's going to vary from person to person. For some people, it's really important, and you know, it's completely up to you, I suppose.
Awesome. So as far as like your art and sculpture and traditional work go, what would you say is like an inspiration for you? Like what keeps you going and what keeps you motivated to continue?
Um, uh, well, I mean, the inspiration thing is probably an easier question to ask, to answer. So I'll start with that. Or is it? I don't know. It's well, the thing is yeah. I mean, there's a lot of yeah. There's a lot of stuff that I guess. I mean, you know, if I talk about specific artists that inspire me, and they've changed, I think, throughout my, you know, throughout my career.
Hmm.
But I mean, as far as sculpture goes, it's always, I don't know, it's strange, like, you know, always wanting to be a creature artist, but I never really looked to creature artists for my inspiration, as much respect as I had for guys, you know, especially, um, you know, Carlos Fuente, for example. I can say the guy's a massive inspiration, but I wouldn't want to study Carlos Fuente because then my designs would, you know, would look like poor imitations of his. You
Right.
know, I mean, it's,
Yeah.
you know, like what makes his designs, it's partly he's got this, you know, the guy draws like, you know, Michelangelo on acid sort of thing. So it's partly his drawing style, but it's partly, you know, it's going through his brain, it's going through that guy's soul, and so it's picking up all of that flavor on the way, and I can't imitate that, you know.
Right.
You know, so
Yeah.
I couldn't want to be like him. I couldn't want to be like, you know, Stan Winston or Rick Baker or anything, you know. So all I could do is kind of live my own life and see what comes out of my brain, you know.
Yeah, that's good.
So because of that, you know, I always felt kind of like, I don't know, yeah, that way I always felt kind of like different, you know, or like a, not an outsider really, but you know, because I, you know, have a huge amount of respect for so many of those guys. But I always looked to traditional arts, and that's, for some reason that's just what personally inspires me, and that was always, well, always has been Rodin and Michelangelo is the two main guys for for that stuff. And if I show you, let's take a look. We take this, which you'll see on the CGMA website and stuff.
Oh yeah, I love this
And
picture.
this was just an écorché sculpt that I did in my own time. But the pose itself was I just stole it from, I have a bust, which, well, I have a little statue which no one knows if it's from Michelangelo or from the studio of Michelangelo. The thing's only like 8 inches high, but I bought it from a friend in Florence, and use that as a basis for it. And then the thing is because Michelangelo finds these really crazy movements, and he's not about accuracy, he's about expression. He was a mannerist, so everything becomes mannered, everything becomes pushed to breaking point, really. So this exercise was basically, right, I'll take that as a jumping off point, and I don't want to lose any of the kind of rhythms that he's found. These kind of constantly dancing line along the outside, played off against like this straight line on the inside, stuff like that. I want to keep all of that, but I want to try and see if I can get some semblance of sensible anatomy underneath it, and that was a really interesting exercise, because then you see where he's just breaking stuff, and he's just changing anatomy to do what he wanted to do, but because he understands it, he knows when he can break it, and it still feels functional. So yeah, something like yes, so much of the way I sculpt and the shapes that I look for is, and this comes in my concepts as well, is really inspired by Michelangelo and Rodin as well. Because Rodin, who was in turn inspired by Michelangelo, both of whom were inspired by the ancient Romans and the ancient Greeks. So there's that sort of lineage, and then I lose interest a little bit as it gets into a tiny bit as it gets into kind of Baroque and Rococo. But yeah, so I guess those are my inspirations, and like I say, that's changed over time, and in the course I use some examples. I look at in the first week I look at Tintoretto, who was a painter, but his drawings look so wobbly, and but in a beautiful way, because he finds all of these movements and everything pushes outwards, which he creates this really strong sense of vitality. Schiele as well, the Austrian artist, who's protege of Klimt, and draws in a very wobbly way that typically we wouldn't really consider for the kind of sculpture that we need to do for visual effects. But I just I get more interested in that design aspect of it, and even if I'm doing a really realistic sculpt, and even if it has to feel very sort of real, I'm still using these ideas. It's always in my mind, and it's still going to influence even the most kind of realistic work that I do. But that's my personal taste, and actually where I struggle most as an artist is getting through and just really refining stuff and getting everything to a perfect finish, because that's not kind of to my taste. It's something that isn't necessarily important in a fine art sense, I guess, but is very important in what we do, because we have to create something that has everything in it, all the tiny little wrinkles, all of the tiny little pores. We can't get away with any of that stuff. So that was answering your question about the inspiration, and then there was another one that I sort of ignored because I remember it being slightly harder, but I can't remember what it was.
I think you answered pretty much everything I was asking about, because it's like,
Okay, cool.
it's, I always get
Oh,
curious.
I know what it was, Alison. It was
Oh.
how do I keep motivated or something, right?
Yeah. How do you keep going with it? Because a lot of artists get fatigued, and they don't. I feel like they don't go and do other things other than art to keep them going.
Yeah.
So what are your methods?
Well, it's I mean, living in London's amazing, because of the because of the access to culture that you have. So that's one thing. Like at the moment we have exhibitions on Turner, on Constable, on Schiele, who I mentioned before, and then we have the like the natural history photography competition and just so many things going on at any one time. So it's very easy to find inspiration around you. And then outside of that, I find like one of the reasons that I don't have a whole bunch of stuff online and I'm not as active as I maybe would want to be in terms of the online community and showing my work and helping other guys out is just because actually I am always just too busy with doing the actual professional work. And so with that sort of stuff, sometimes it can be difficult to keep your inspiration going or whatever. But really, when you've got a deadline to hit and you've got someone waiting on the work, it stops becoming an option, really, and that becomes a huge motivator when there's someone waiting on the work. So for the past few years, it's been largely that actually. It's just having to do the work, and so having no other option but to do it, which I appreciate might not be a useful answer for someone who is who's not working and looking for inspiration, and so to someone like that, I would say, it can be really difficult when you hit this point where you just and we all hit it. We all have these kind of swings where sometimes you're just constantly doing stuff and you just can't get enough of it, and then sometimes it's just really difficult to find and to start, and I guess yeah, this is why I avoided answering it, because it's a really difficult thing to think about. How would you get about overcoming that? I think, and I know it's a really bad answer to just say, just do it. And I think what can happen as well is that, and I certainly have this. I start a lot of projects and I finish very few of them, in terms of personal projects.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, because that can be a thing. You can just get sick of a project, and that kills the motivation. So I do always try and have a couple of things on the go. So if I get bored with one thing, I can drop onto another thing, and yeah. So I think potentially that's part of it, and then just making sure you have a variety of ways that you can try and break this wall down to try and get into working. So so maybe you've been practicing just getting a really nice finished polished sculpt, and then instead of that, you say, actually, I really can't bring myself to do work. I'm feeling, uninspired or whatever. But just force yourself to do half-hour speed sculpt of a torso or of a head or something, and that might be a jumping-off point to something else. That might then trigger your excitement. Probably will, because the hardest point is actually getting over that hump and convincing yourself that you want to actually do it. Once you start doing it and you start getting into the rhythm, that's then much easier. I mean, I had let me see one of these things here. So this thing was a very quick sort of sculpt that I did while I was on Hercules. I had a morning when I just had no work and I just wanted to be doing something. So I just started. I started with a plane and just saw what it turned into. But then this then started giving me other ideas for other sculpts, and this, and for, at some point I'm putting exhibitions together of my personal sculpting work, and a lot of it is in a style that I used to sculpt in, a very very realistic style, like 19th century realism. That's what I studied, that's what I always used to sculpt, and now it's moving more into this, and this was my sort of jumping off point to go, actually, what, this kind of thing, I want to explore this, and and in my classes I talk a lot about sort of lost and found lines and things like that, and this is taking that and pushing it to an extreme, in areas. Yeah, so that was just, just a morning that I would just force myself to do that, because the alternative was just sitting around waiting to get given work, and the sculpt itself is what it is, but it was, it fed into a whole bunch more ideas and sort of kick-started a whole bunch of other things. So yeah, maybe the answer is then, if you're really struggling for stuff, just to give yourself something small to do. Yes,
Mm-hmm.
yes, that's it. That's my answer.
Yeah,
Because because always when you have ideas, they're going to always be massive ideas, and
yes.
so the thing I was talking about right at the start, this project that I did in university of a stripper peeling off her skin, you know, that sounded like a really fun, exciting idea, and I had most of the year to do it, and it nearly killed me because it was such a huge idea.
Oh, wow.
And this thing I see in so many people, they and students especially, especially if they have like a full VFX project they have to do, and you kind of like, yeah, keep it simple, keep it simple, keep it something manageable, and you tell them this, because I go and I do university lectures and stuff at times, and I help out with that kind of stuff, so I have some experience of that, and you tell them all this, and you tell them the pitfalls, and then they go away and they want to create Gollum, and not just the model, they want to have it
Yeah.
textured and rigged and blah blah blah, and you can see that they're going to fall into this just painful pit of despair as they try and do it, and
Mhm.
and you can learn a lot in the process of doing it. But yeah, so in terms of keeping yourself motivated, keeping yourself interested, make sure that even if you can't resist giving yourself these impossible goals that maybe don't seem impossible, but are once you try them, counterbalance that with just some manageable things, some
Yeah.
small things, something where yeah, after half an hour you're done.
Right.
And I think that's going to be useful for breaking down that sort of door of fear,
Exactly.
in terms of getting.
Just something that where it can be like gratifying, where you can say I
Yeah,
started
yeah,
it and
yeah,
was able to finish it. I think that's a
yeah,
huge thing
exactly that.
for people,
Yeah,
is like being able to start something and being able to finish something gives you a lot of confidence, and it motivates you to keep going and pursuing, harder and harder things. But just doing them like small and then working your way up is kind of the best thing to do. But yeah, for real.
yeah, agreed. And I guess that then feeds into kind of this whole issue with your own ego and trying to separate yourself from that, which is hard.
Mhm.
My ego was much bigger when I was a much less experienced artist, and and then you kind of, well, hopefully you learn to then tame that a little bit. But it's that the problem is not, obviously, like, having a big ego can make you difficult to work with for other guys, but it can also really hinder your own work, because you can be afraid to
Yes.
start something, even because you don't want to you don't want to start something that might not be amazingly good or whatever, and it's that fear that that you might not be amazing or whatever that can really be crippling, and that then
Mhm.
feeds into working in visual effects as well, because I've had guys on my team who I need to see the work that they're doing, but they're kind of scared to show it because they want to really polish it and get it looking amazing uh, before they show it, and that can so then they kind of hide it up until the last day, and then you look at it and you're like, well, you were jumping off in the wrong direction to start with. And
Oh no.
I was speaking to Eamon Butler, who is the, what's that? Oh, you just oh noing along with me?
No, yeah.
Hello?
I are you there? Yeah, no, I was
Yeah,
just
I'm here.
saying like
Um,
I totally understand. That's awful.
right. So yeah, yeah, I was talking to this with a guy called Damon Butler, who was the animation supervisor at DNEG once upon a time, and it's been around forever. Was at Disney for 20 years or something, and is now is now one of the owners and animation supervisor at or creative supervisor at Cinesight. And he has a very he's a great manager of people, and so I learned a lot about him in terms of leading a team and things like that, and he has this philosophy. Well, two things, I guess. One is whenever he's giving a talk to students, he always asks them, if I was to give you an assignment, what would be the if I give it to you on Monday and it's due for the next Monday, when should you show it to me? And they might say, like, Thursday or something, and then we have Friday to do feedback on it or whatever, and they're always like, yeah, I need some time to work it up. And he's like, no, you show it to me end of the day Monday, because it doesn't matter how poor it is, he can then see if you're going in the right direction, the wrong direction. And the guy's experienced enough to know when a work is a work in progress. It's almost insulting to think that like your lead wouldn't necessarily know that it wasn't finished, and so that then leads him into his philosophy of the mindset that people should have within a visual effects field, or specifically animation, I guess, because that's his bag.
Mhm.
But he's kind of like, look, within this studio, everyone's got their pants down, and
Right.
and so and he uses that as a very literal metaphor. So, initially, if everyone's got their pants down, it's kind of a very awkward thing, right? And everyone's looking around and kind of sizing each other up or whatever. And but then you get over that kind of hurdle, and everyone's used to it, and it's very normal. And from that point onwards, there's nothing to hide from each other, and it's that sort of feeling. And I can't remember how I segued into this. I think we were talking about ego, right? And
Oh,
just
yeah.
and I guess this is also part of
This has a lot to do
kind of
with
like,
it, of course, because it's
right,
just letting go of basically letting go of everything that you're afraid of, and just throwing it out there and being like, here we go. And then everyone else, I mean, because it has to be very, very transparent, I would imagine, to have a seamless workflow and a strong team of people. Like, people need to understand each other as well as how they all work. So, and if you can't, then you can't really mesh things together and find good deadlines and meet milestones and stuff. It's just harder
absolutely.
to guess when you could just see it. Just see everybody for what they are and how they are, and for their skills and stuff. Makes it a lot easier.
Exactly that. And then I guess that also kind of takes you to criticism and being able to give out criticism, which is an art. Some people kind of give criticism in a way that can be quite destructive, I think. But then also receiving criticism is also an art, and that's something that can be very difficult for some people starting out. I certainly struggled with it, just I don't know, not taking it too personally or whatever, or not, I think oftentimes I haven't actually had it with my CGMA students, but it is something that I've encountered quite a lot. Is you give someone some feedback or whatever, you explain something to them, and straight away they're getting defensive, explaining why they did it this way or why they did it that way, and rather than just listening to what you've got to say, I guess. And and I think that kind of, and actually it was when I was studying in Florence, that was when I really got to grips with that, because the teachers there could be really quite brutal, really tear your work apart, that you've just spent 2 months on solid, and they're just telling you this is awful. And it's a similar thing that we were talking about before, when we're like, when you're doing your work and you've got your client feedback, it's a job, and it's a similar sort of thing, just become accustomed to having feedback. You may agree with it, sometimes you may not agree with it, but it's never personal, and if someone does mean it in a very personal sense, then that person needs to, that probably tells you quite a lot about that person, but it's up to you to know how to deal with it, and and there's no, you of course get prima donnas everywhere, and certainly in visual effects, but really, just try not to be that person yourself, because the best results are always going to come from, from kind of people working together.
Yeah, that's great advice, though. That's actually really priceless. I think the fall of many artists is probably due to that, the fact that they can't detach ego from their work and be open to opinions and like words of improvement, whether destructive or not. It's like, it is indeed an art form to give and accept that kind of stuff.
It really is, and I don't know if there's any magic formula to it other than just getting used to it, but also your own experience teaches it a lot as well. And this, I think, is why we see it more with with kind of guys who are starting out, because for me at least, when I was studying computer animation, my modeling skills were very poor, but they were better than like the other guys in the class, because I was doing more modeling stuff, and so then I then equated that with me actually being a good modeler, which I wasn't in any capacity, and it was it was only when I learned a bit more about sculpting and a bit more about modeling that I realized how inadequate my skills had been, and then I had this process let's say every 6 months, where I'd look back at my old work and just go, oh Jesus, did I really think that was any good? And so through going through that process, however many times I went through it, eventually you start to learn, you learn to get suspicious of your own opinion, and you learn to kind of go, well, even if I think it's amazing, maybe I'll just, you know, step back and try and look at it objectively, you know,
Yeah.
which for me then fed into an extreme, you know, where I where I don't actually where I can't sort of enjoy any of my own work. But if you can stop just short of that extreme, then I think that's probably the ideal place that you want to be.
Right. Yeah. No, I agree. Well, that's awesome. So we're about close to the end of the interview. Did you have any last words, or would you like to mention anything before we end the session?
Um, last words.
Last words of inspiration, motivation.
No, I don't know. I you know, I mean, I guess I talk a little bit about sort of the nature of well, how I perceive it as talent, you know, versus nature versus nurture sort of thing. I mean, that's a subject that's been covered a lot, but you know, it's something that I think there's an inclination of people to think that, you know, things can either be you know, some people are either cut out for something or they're not, you know, and I think, you know, there's there's always going to be an element of some people pick up things better than others, but in my experience, it's you know, 99% of any of what we can achieve as character artists or as people or whatever is generally just down to graft, you know, and you know, maybe you'll see someone doing a demo or whatever it is where certain things look easy, and it hasn't been. The journey's never been easy. You know, it's always been ridiculously hard, and it's hard for all of us. Just, you know, some people are starting out, so they don't see that so much. But you know, I remember when I was starting out and how hard it was, and you know, and even now still how hard it is. So so yeah, I think just you know, keep that in mind and just kind of keep plugging away. You know, it's just
Oh yeah, that's
you
great.
just got to keep putting in those hours, really.
Yeah, don't give up. Keep
And
going. No stopping.
yeah, you know, and but then the other thing to mention, and you know, I've mentioned it in the interview before, so I don't want to sound like I'm, you know, always wheeling it out, but I think, you know, on the flip side of that, you know, we have this thing where, you know, you just got to be putting in huge amounts of hours and you know, really getting yourself to the highest level of skill that you can get to. But on the flip side of that, you can't forget to kind of live your own life as well, you know, and you can't afford to forget about that. And you know, there's times in crunch times on films and stuff where I've let down, you know, whoever it's been, you know, whether it's friends or girlfriends or family or whatever the situation's been. And if I could go back and not do that, then I absolutely would. And I think it's, you know, from an artistic point of view, you know, you have to be able to have, you know, to have a kind of as full life as possible, so that, you know, you have I don't know, you kind of nourish your own soul, you know, so you have something that you can, especially if you're doing concept stuff or whatever, you know, that you can bring out and say to people, and you can't do that, I don't think, if you're just cooped up in your room and you're just, you know, never seeing the light of day or anything. So so yeah, it's these kind of two conflicting things, you know. One is, yeah, you're going to have to kind of work until you're just about to drop and you can't bear to work anymore. And then the flip side of that, you've got to not forget to live your life as, you know, as much as you can, and that is going to, and that's going to directly impact your work. It's going to make you a much stronger artist. So so yeah, even from just a purely logistical point of view, from a purely functional point of view, as developing yourself as an artist, you need to do that if you want to improve. So so yeah, I guess that's everything. That's everything I would say about anything.
No, that's great advice. I think it's important to continue, like, because you're an artist and you're also a human that needs to experience life to derive inspiration from it. So, no, it's good. You gotta not coop yourself up.
Because
go do stuff, experience things, because all of that is usually what inspires you to make new things and be inspired, like, just by life. That's awesome.
Yeah. It's exactly that, you know.
So before we go, there is one question. Someone was asking, how can students themselves approach giving feedback to other students without the danger of possibly misleading them? someone's just trying to figure out how to improve giving
Yeah.
critique?
Yeah, that's a good question. So how to improve giving critique? Yeah, I think so. There can be a tendency when you're learning stuff to keep spotting all of these mistakes that people are making. And well, I don't know if that's just me, but I went through this thing, and you start to look at everything through a kind of like almost a negative filter, and then part of that can be also like your own sort of ego, because it can be frustrating to see other people doing work that's better than you, or you've got your own insecurities and whatever. So I think, and I would say this, not only in terms of giving critiques, but also like when you're if you're looking at any art anywhere, whether it's stuff online or whether you go into a gallery or something, even if it's stuff that maybe that's not really to your taste, is to try and look at it in as much of a positive way as possible, and find the things that you like about it, rather than find the things that you don't like about it. And that's always my approach to critique. Find what's working, and let's really push that. And in the course of that, yeah, there will be things that you can then bring up to the level of the things that are working. But that's certainly the way that I would approach a critique, rather than
Yeah.
this doesn't work, that doesn't work, that doesn't work.
Right.
And
Not
that's a kind of
focusing on the
destructive way
bad
to look at it.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and and I think it's destructive both in terms of the actual critique, because you're going to upset people, but also it's just a bad way to look at anything, the world, or any piece of artwork or anything like that. So yeah, that's just my advice for critique. And you can start you can get scientific about that and be like, right, have this compliment sandwich, right? You start with saying something good, and then you go through all the bad things, and then you finish with saying something good. Yeah, so that's a fairly safe formula, I guess, for doing a critique. But really, yeah, just find the things that you like about it, and everything else then just falls into place, because you're then aiming to bring everything up to the standard of the thing that you like about it. So you're looking at everything in a very positive way.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah. No, that's very important, I think. Keeping it all positive, because it's about growth, and
Yeah.
but you also have to identify what you're doing wrong, but there's always a way of letting people know that, like, without being really mean or defeating, I guess you could
Yeah,
say.
because the thing is that there's never going to be anything that anyone shows you that is just irredeemably bad. It just cannot be, because in the process of doing it, there'll be something that they do, something of their natural kind of tendency or whatever it is that that just that works for that particular thing. So that then becomes your jumping off point, and that then becomes what you start to pull everything else. That becomes your reference point for everything else. So yeah, the critique could essentially be saying, look, nearly everything is wrong here. We need to fix nearly everything, but your reference point is the thing that works. So again, it's just a way of looking at things, and you've got to do that without kind of being contrived about it, I guess. But like I say, there's always going to be something good that you can find about it, and so that's yeah. I mean, that's just my approach. There's some very good teachers who just have a kind of more brutalist approach to it, and just kind of take a student apart, and that can be a very useful learning experience for the student as well. Just just not necessarily the way that I approach it.
Yeah. No, that's good. That's good. Like, well, you've come pretty far in this model here, from like only about 30 minutes of sculpting. That's actually amazing. Awesome. Well, I think this about wraps up the session. Thank you so much for joining us, Christian, and
Yeah, no, thanks
thank
very
you
much for having
to,
me.
yeah, no problem. It was a lot of fun. Thank you to everyone who joined us, and we'll have this interview saved on our YouTube channel, so please be sure to subscribe to us. And for more information about Christian and us at CGMA, visit our website at www.cgmasteracademy.com. And have an awesome day, everyone. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you very much, everyone, and thank you, Alison.
You're welcome. See you.